when Rachmaninov had finished a composition for orchestra, he did me the great honor of sending it to me. I would study it, and when I knew it thoroughly, I would rehearse it with the orchestra, and then, as in the case of his 4 piano concertos or the variations on the theme of Paganini, he would come to Philadelphia and we would rehearse the music. Then it always happened that he would be dissatisfied with the orchestration, and he would begin to say, why does not this sound clear? Why is this too prominent, or this not prominent enough? And we would talk it over together, and then he would make changes. But the trouble was that his music had already been printed. I mean, the scores and the orchestral parts were already printed over in New York. So, unfortunately, the persons who play that music today do not know the changes which he made at that time. Rachmaninov was an extremely simple man, very melancholy. I used to meet him in Paris, and we used to go into a certain cellar deep under a house where one was really in Russia, because everything was Russian down there, and we used to drink certain kinds of drink from Russia, not vodka, but other simpler drinks. And then he would tell me about his childhood. He evidently lived near a lake, and he used to go down and play on the edge of the lake with other boys, and there were ducks and geese and some other birds. I can't remember now what they were, but he used to love those birds and to play with the boys on the edge of that lake. He longed to go back to his native land and renew all those joys that he had known as a child. But of course that was not possible for him, because he was intensely antagonistic to everything in the Soviet Union. So I would listen to him, and he would recreate his life then. He had a curious type of humor. He always had a very straight face, and he would say the craziest, most amusing things. And but one could look at his face, one could not tell from his expression how he meant that. But he had a kind of humor that was, how to say, it was satiric, it was bitter, and at the same time with great charm and great friendliness. He always addressed me as monsieur. We always spoke in French, and he always, when he wrote to me or I wrote to him, it was always in a formal manner. But behind that, or below that, so to speak, surface, was great humor, and I was happy to say a great friendship.
It might be nice if you could recall perhaps one joke or one anecdote that he told.
I remember one day Rachmaninov said to me, "This passage is the trumpet. He's not prominent enough, that trumpet." So we tried it again, and I signed to the trumpet to play more, and he still was dissatisfied. And we tried it a third time, and Rachmaninov was still dissatisfied. And finally said, "That will not be good until that trumpet player is very red in the face."
Did you have a personal friendship with Sibelius?
Oh, yes, and one I valued very greatly. I used to go to Finland to conduct mainly Sibelius music, and we became great friends. We traveled together in Finland, and I learned very much from him, because he was not only a great composer, but he had a wonderful mind and a wonderful knowledge of certain aspects of cultural life up in the northern part of Europe, because Sibelius was partly Finnish and partly from the next country, Swedish. I believe he had bloods of both countries, and he had memories and understandings of both cultures. And so I learned very much from him of the extreme northern parts of Europe.
Mr. Stokowsky, you trained and rehearsed the Philadelphia Orchestra in Strauss's compositions when he made his first American tour in the early 1920s, but he conducted the orchestra in the actual concerts. Would you tell us about your work with him at that time?
Yes, it's a very happy memory on my part too. I received a cable from him, because I knew him personally, to say that he was engaged to make a tour of his compositions in the United States, and he would like to do that with the Philadelphia Orchestra. I cabled back to say, of course, we're all happy, and if you will let me know your programs, we will prepare them ahead of time so that you will not have to rehearse. We did this, we made the rehearsals, and he came, and after running through a few moments just to make sure he understood and the orchestra understood his tempo, he said, "Fabelhaftes Orchestra." That was his feeling about our orchestra here. And we made the tour. And the last concert I was with him all the time. The last concert was in New York. And next morning, Strauss telephoned me saying, you often talk about Chinese art. I have a friend here who has a great collection in the house. I'm going to see it today. Would you like to come with me? Of course I wanted to, so we went. We came to a very large house. There was nobody in the house except one manservant, a butler, who left us alone. We walked from room to room looking at wonderful things. Finally we came to a big room where there was a huge Chinese screen on the wall, one of the most magnificent screens I've ever seen. And we looked at this a long time in silence, and then Strauss said, not to me, now this is very important, not to me, but to himself, "Ja, ich bin nur..." Was hat er gesagt? Moment. Just a moment, I must think of the exact word. "Ja, ich bin nur ein Rococo-Komponist." In English, I am only a Rococo composer. I imagine he meant by that, he was talking to himself, that the art of Chinese painting was so great, that he was so profoundly impressed, that it made him search inside of himself to see what kind of music he was creating. And I think that showed the simplicity and modesty of this very great man.
Could you tell me this? You rehearsed the compositions and then he conducted the final concerts. How did you know what interpretation to train your men in? And what did you leave for him to change?
I did not know, except that Strauss was not only a great composer, but he was a great conductor. And I had often heard him conduct in Germany and in Vienna. And so I knew to some extent his ideas, but the Philadelphia Orchestra was so sensitive that when he conducted, even if he did it a little differently from the way they were accustomed to play that music, they followed him without any difficulty whatever.
You said that he was already a friend of yours. How did you become friendly with him, and where did you meet?
I first met him in Vienna, and I remember that while he was in Philadelphia, he said, "Where are the good places to eat?" And I thought I knew some in Philadelphia and in New York and other places, so I took him to these places, and the first thing he always said, "Will it be Heizung? Will it be heating?" Because he didn't like central heating. And I would always telephone ahead to the restaurants that say, would you do me a favor and turn off the heat? I'm going to bring Richard Strauss. Well, I never did it. You can, and when we came in, he always just said, "Es gibt Heizung." That's the first thing he would say.
What's that?
There is heat. And the next thing he always said, do they have Austern? Do they have oysters? Because he loved our American oysters. So those were two of my amusing impressions.
Could you tell us something about your work with Stravinsky when you premiered some of his works in the Sacre du Printemps and some of the others that you premiered in the 1920s?
In the 20s and 30s, with the Philadelphia Orchestra, I had the honor and privilege of conducting much of Stravinsky's music, some of his compositions for the first time. For example, we produced in Philadelphia and later in New York in the Metropolitan Opera his Sacre du Printemps as a ballet. Of course, that is often also played in concerts as a concert piece. But in reality, I understood from Stravinsky that he intended it to be a ballet of primitive Russia, of the Russia that is before history, of ideas and religious dances and even human sacrifice that was in ancient primitive Russia.
Did he come to Philadelphia to work on these compositions when you were giving them their first performances in America?
Stravinsky came to many of our rehearsals and assisted us greatly to understand the complexity of his music and particularly its rhythmic structure.
A lot of music lovers have been interested in noting how Stravinsky conducts his own music, since he has now recorded so much of it. And in general, he seems to give everything a more lean and perhaps less lush and less opulent rendition than other conductors do. I'm wondering whether what his reaction was when he heard you rehearse the music at that time. Did he have any comments on the way you were interpreting it?
Stravinsky is today not only developing as a composer in new directions, but also as a conductor. I remember how he conducted long time ago and how he conducts today. It's quite different. So apparently he has extremely new ideas as conductor as well as composer.
Stokowsky, talking about Stravinsky. Edgar Varese, the Frenchman who pioneered with dissonant, mechanical music in the 1920s. Could you tell us something about what the man was like in those days and how these works were received?
They were received mostly with hisses. I think today Varese is one of the foremost figures in music today. I think he is still not understood. It just takes time. But I notice all your questions are of the past. How about the future? I live only in the future. One cannot do anything about the past. One cannot change it. One can change the present, every second of it. And one can change the future. One can create the future. And that's where the interest of life lies, in my opinion, and the enjoyment of life and the enjoyment of music.
I knew you were going to say that.
How did you know I was going to say that? No, tell me that.
Oh, I know from your whole outlook on music and in the things you've said. You're forward-looking. Just please bear with people like us who want to learn from the past and who were not around to experience it.